Welcome to this video on le futur. We're going to be looking at two future tenses in French, how they're formed and how they're used. So today our learning objectives are, we're going to revise how to form the futur proche to talk about future holidays, and we're going to revise how to form the futur simple to talk about future holidays. So these two future tenses that you need to be able to use and know how to form in French. Firstly, we're going to be looking at the futur proche. Now, this tense is formed with aller in the appropriate form, followed by the infinitive. So, you need to make sure that you know the different forms of aller, which are je vais, tu vas, il va, nous allons, vous allez, and ils vont. To those, you need then to add the infinitive. So, for example, I'm going to go, je vais aller. You're going to travel, tu vas voyager. With that in mind, pause the video and try these. Try these translations into French using the futur proche. Okay, so let's just check you've got those right. Okay, I'm going to buy. So we need the je form. So je vais, and then the verb acheter. Je vais acheter. Second one, we're going to choose. So we need the nous form, nous allons, and then the infinitive choisir. Nous allons choisir. Next one, she is going to go. So we need the elle form of the verb. Elle va plus the infinitive aller. They are going to work. So we need the ils form of the verb. Ils vont, and then travailler. Ils vont travailler. We are going to play. So in the nous form, nous allons jouer. Nous allons jouer. We're going to play. I'm going to sunbathe. Now this one's a bit trickier because you've got a reflexive verb. So you need the je form, so je vais, and then you need the reflexive, but you need to remember to change it. So je vais me bronzer because it's you that's sunbathing. So you need to change the reflexive pronoun on that reflexive verb. Okay. You singular are going to stay in a campsite. So tu vas rester dans un camping. Okay, so you've got the tu form. Then you plural are going to go to Japan and France. Now we need to be quite careful here because of those prepositions. Okay, to Japan and to France here. Okay, we need to think back to those prepositions that we've learned and what countries they go with. So here it's vous allez, aller, okay, au Japon, because Japon is masculine, et en France, okay, and we use en because France is feminine, so we're going to go au Japon and en France. Look over your answers and think if you did make mistakes, why did you make them, and how are you going to avoid making them next time? So, now that we've looked over the futur proche, we're going to look at the futur simple. Now, what did these different sentences mean? Pause the video and have a think. Okay, so now you've thought, hopefully you've come to the conclusion that these endings on the futur simple mean will. So, je travaillerai dans le jardin, I will work in the garden. Nous achèterons des vêtements, we will buy clothes. Elle finira ses devoirs, she will finish her homework. Tu joueras au tennis, you'll play tennis. Ils m'attendront, they will wait for me. So we notice here that unlike the futur proche, we've only got one bit in the verb. So it's just one verb with endings on at the end. Okay? So unlike the futur proche, there are two bits. So here, the reason it's called simple is because there's only one bit to the verb. Now notice what all of these verbs have in common. They all have an R in them. Okay? Remember the future stem always has an R in it. If you haven't got an R, you've formed the futur simple wrong. So firstly, we're going to need to look over how to form that future stem. Now, for regular ER and IR verbs, the future stem is just the infinitive. So for instance, for the verb finir, the future stem is finir. For the verb manger, the future stem is manger. For regular RE verbs, it's a little bit more tricky. It's the future stem well, the future stem is the infinitive without the E. So for instance, attendre goes to attendre without the E. Répondre goes to répondre without the E on the end. Because we need to have the R at the end of the future stem, otherwise we've done it wrong. You then add these endings to the future stem. Et, a, on, et, on. Now, that should remind you of something. That should remind you of the verb avoir in the present, okay? So these vowels at the end are all the same as those on avoir, okay? Unfortunately, there's obviously some irregulars, as there often are, and they're of the most common verbs. So, aller, our irregular future stem is ir. Avoir, our irregular future stem is or. Être, our irregular future stem is ser. Faire, our irregular future stem is faire. And for pouvoir, our irregular future stem is pour, with two R's. Now, luckily, it's the same endings that we've just learned. So our AI, ASA, ONS, EZ, ONT. Now that you've learnt those rules, and you've got notes on those, try these translations. Pause the video, write your responses, and then press play. Now, all of these you will have done in the futur simple, so there'll just be one verb. So, I will go. J'irai. Hopefully you've remembered that irregular future stem. We will choose. Nous choisirons. So we've got a future stem, choisir, and then the endings ONS. She will travel. Elle voyagera. They will work. Ils travailleront. We will play. Nous jouerons. I will sunbathe. That's je me bronzerai. Okay, hopefully you've remembered that reflexive pronoun there. You will stay in a hotel. This is you singular. Tu resteras dans un hôtel. And you plural are going to go to Spain and to Vietnam. So again, you need to be careful with those prepositions, okay? So vous irez en Espagne et au Vietnam, because Vietnam is masculine. Okay, so we've got the en for the feminine Espagne and au for the masculine Vietnam. Check over your notes. If you've made any mistakes here, think about why you've made them and how you're going to avoid making them in the future. So, you should now have notes on the futur proche, which you're going to have remembered has two parts to it. So, for instance, je vais voyager. You've got the part of aller there plus the infinitive. Then you've also got the futur simple, which is just one verb. That's why it's simple. For instance, j'irai. And you'll remember that the future stem always ends in R. If you haven't got an R in your verb, you've got it wrong. Make sure your notes are all filled, ready for the exercise that we're doing in class tomorrow.